Okay, welcome to Halfway There. This is Eric Nivens, and Halfway There is a show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. And I'm excited to bring this one to you. This is, I have with me a guest. She is a mom. She's a former missionary, and I got a feeling we're going to talk a lot about that. And she's an author. And so I can't wait to hear a little bit about her story today. Welcome, Ellen Rosenberger, to Halfway There.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here.
It's fun. We've been talking about doing this for a while. I'm glad we've got it going, and I can't wait to hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Let's so I gave just kind of a brief overview of who you are, kind of big titles. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where God has you now, and then we'll go back and dig through your story.
Sure. Well, I actually have spent more time in my life living overseas than I have been living in the United States. When I was 4 years old, my family moved to Bolivia in South America, and that's where I spent all of my growing up years. My parents were missionaries there, and so I was there since 4 years of age till I graduated from high school. And then after college, about a year after college, I had come back to the States for college, but I went to Nicaragua and didn't know anyone there, and was a missionary teacher, and that's where I met my husband, and we ended up spending close to 12 years there, and then just recently moved here to Denver about a year and a half ago. So, I would say my life has been characterized by change and by, living in different cultures. So that's kind of probably the biggest, characteristic of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting that you've lived more of your life outside the United States than in.
Yeah.
What is weird about living in the United States that the rest of us can't see?
Oh man, there's a lot of different things. I mean, I can't think of something specific, I guess, because there's a lot of them. But just like little things, I think, tile floors overseas, usually, at least where I lived, as opposed to like carpet here. Or, just walking in a store and everything's clean and organized and you can find things, and you can usually find cheap things here as opposed to many places overseas. There's a lot of little things, and then big things too, just differences of values, right? Time is a huge one.
Sure.
Just like time here just moves at a quicker pace, and just kind of getting used to that, as opposed to time over there is like, the value of people and community and family is a little bit higher. So, you can stop and have a 15-20 minute conversation or longer, and it's okay, so.
Yeah. And you're not just late for something.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because if you show up on time, you're early, and it's probably not starting yet. So.
Yeah. Well, my wife will tell you that I've tried to implement that in our family. She doesn't buy it. She does not want to be late. So it's okay. I'm always a little that way.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so that's a little bit of the sketch. Tell us a little bit about you grew up as a missionary kid.
Mm-hmm.
In Bolivia. So tell us what was that experience like? And then I'm especially curious how you came to Christ personally.
The first part of that question, how the experience was for me, I feel like lots of missionary kids or MKs have varying degrees of experiences. Mine was positive overall. I felt like, we had lots of fun adventures, and definitely loved learning Spanish and growing up speaking Spanish, and just being exposed to different culture. I really I loved it. I enjoyed my time in a different culture. And I know that, there are other people that have different experiences, harder ones maybe. but for me, it was pretty positive.
Was
And as
that,
far as,
I'm sorry, was that because of where you were, or was that because of your family or the community you had around you?
yeah, it might have been a combination. We, had a pretty close knit group of, like, in our missionary community. We called all the other families, aunts and uncles, and I think also my parents were pretty intentional about, getting us exposed to the country we were living in, but also keeping us connected with our family back in the States, cousins and grandparents, and just really wanting to have a balanced experience. And, I also had great mentors in high school, people that really poured into my life in positive ways and, discipling me, and which in turn gave me that excitement and passion for doing that, investing in the generation behind me once I was out of college and wanting to go to a, missionary kids school and give back that way. So, so that, I think those were all factors. And also too, I'll mention this isn't necessarily the trend anymore, but a lot of times, missionary kids would have to go to boarding schools, and, those are difficult sometimes. I know many that have had great experiences, but I know many that have had difficult experiences. And I'm thankful that I was able to stay home with my family. And I think that had, something to do with it too, that I didn't feel, completely disconnected from my parents and their ministry, and that they were choosing their ministry over raising us.
Right. So. Yeah, that would add a whole nother layer of complexity to the experience.
Oh,
I'm sure.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So then the other part of your question, like, how did I come to Christ? I did at a very young age. I'd say I think I was even 3 or 3.5. It was like right before we went to Bolivia. And, I remember the time very clearly, the day I went in and asked my mom to, if she'd pray with me. It was actually, she wrote down the date. It was March 1st. So just a few days ago.
Oh, cool.
I think I could track how many years it was, but, so very childlike faith, all the, Awana Bible verses and things I'd heard in Sunday school, and just wanting to respond to that. And I did. But, as we'll probably unpack my story a little bit, I don't know that I had a very, strong, deep understanding of what Jesus actually did for me until later on in life. Yeah. So that's where my faith journey began, I guess. But definitely my relationship with Christ has become even more real in recent years.
Yeah, of course. Well, that makes perfect sense given your family and their work. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly a common story, and it's a great one. It's a good one to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, so tell us, how then did your faith become your own?
Yeah, I think I love that, your podcast is all about this journey, this Christian journey. I love that, it doesn't happen the same way for each person. And for me, I think it was a series of different circumstances in my life, different highs and lows. So I could look back at, definitely I mentioned this in high school, like being discipled, college, some, relationship struggles and how you learn through those, and really growing in my faith there too, because I went to a Bible school and just really just took that all in and loved that time of my life. And then probably one of my, probably most bottom of the pit experiences happened after college. I had just gone to Nicaragua as a missionary teacher there, and had been there a year and a half or so. And, I was 25 years old and had never, ever experienced any kind of depression at all in my life. And really, in growing up in sort of this missionary culture and Christianity, it wasn't really talked about much, like, depression or what you do to handle it either. So it kind of took me by surprise, and didn't really know how to handle it. And, really at that breaking point, where it's like I felt so distanced from God, that was like, my darkest hour. And yet knowing that he was right there with me. I remember one night, I just called up my friend Mary, and just said, like in tears, I need to know that God loves me. And that was like my, darkest moment. And from there, she came immediately over and we prayed, and, but it wasn't like, let's stop there. Like she, helped me get the help, the help that I needed. And I didn't really realize that, it's not just this pray it away and you'll get better from depression kind of thing. Like God has made us these whole people, and, we need nutrition, and we need to get exercise, and we need all these things to keep our bodies, running well. And so anyway, I think, I can pinpoint that time in my life as a a time where God just really showed me his presence, that he doesn't leave me even in the hardest, darkest hours of feeling, really abandoned. And then, I could go into more stories too of later on. Then, after having victory over that time of depression in my life, then after, experiencing some postpartum depression, and how that really shook my faith again in different ways, and kind of unveiled other things that, just revealed, I guess, that my faith wasn't really standing on the work of the cross, that Jesus had covered all my sin, including, this sort of self-righteousness that I had been living in for years. So anyway, that kind of tells you a lot of different pieces all at once.
That's good. That's okay. So I'm wondering, and I'm gonna go through this one piece at a time. So I want to know about the people who invested in you, because it sounded like they were really important to you.
Yeah.
How did they do that? And can you, do you have any stories about moments when those people were investing in you and that really shaped who you are?
Yeah, I think I can remember like specific, times when, I would, there's one gal that had come down to teach at our Christian school. She'd come down for a year only, but then she decided to stay a second year. And that to me was huge. Like, a missionary kid's life is full of change, people coming, people going all the time. And, I formed a relationship with this teacher. She was a first grade teacher. So I came, and I think I was a junior in high school, and I volunteered in her classroom. And that just grabbed my heart for a love for teaching. But not only that, like she just consistently would reach out to me and spend time with me. It didn't matter what it was, like going on a walk or hanging out. There was another teacher as well who, kind of different story. She had been there a long time and continued to pour into students, just having us over for a sleepover, the girls, or like Bible studies. Just, I think that would be the biggest thing, is that they took time and demonstrated that Jesus is relationship by them, offering relationship. Like he does stuff with us. He's with us. He's always present, and so, I think that those were huge.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important. Those moments when people will invest in you with time.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was in high school or so. So you ended up going to Moody for college.
Yeah.
What did you study there?
TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages.
And did you do that with the idea that you were going to go back?
Yeah. So that was my thought. Was like, I just felt like God was drawing me overseas again, and that could be a vehicle to, to have relationships, to just, be part of ministry. And so that's actually what I did the first 2 years I was in Nicaragua, I taught ESL at the Christian school we were at. Later on, I ended up teaching preschool, but incorporated a lot of what I had been trained in or learned in that setting, because most of my students in my classroom were Nicaraguan kids, and so they were coming in with Spanish as their first language and English was their second. So it was basically teaching a class of all these little ESL learners
Yeah.
at that point. So
Gotcha. I see. Okay, so that's the connection to teaching, because you're a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that came from, learning with the other teacher.
Yeah, just seeing how she ran her classroom and just her love for it, and just getting that experience just to she would allow me to run her like circle time in the morning, doing the calendar and like reading the books and things like that. I just fell in love with that, with the education world, I guess, and students and like kids. So
yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to fill in those blanks there.
Sure.
So then after college, so you told us a story, but I'm curious. So you go back to Nicaragua, and this is where kind of depression hit you.
Yeah.
Was that out of the blue? Was it like what do you think were some of the why did that happen?
Yeah, triggers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I was 24 when I moved to Nicaragua. I didn't know a soul, but quickly did make very good friends, lifelong friends actually. Found a great community. And yet, I'm a 24-year-old. I think very immature in not only still my faith, but also just even my own self-concept and who I was and making my own choices. I think that kind of reflects back to sort of a life that I had lived of people pleasing. And, there's a certain level, I think, of pressure on, pastors' kids, missionary kids to be a certain way and, act a certain way. And so I think a lot of that compounded for me when I was, started to get into some, relationship drama with a certain someone who is now my husband. And,
okay.
In such a small setting, a Christian setting, there's only a certain number of single available guys to go around for all the ladies. And, just a lot of everyone knows everyone's business basically. And so, I think I really, it sounds so silly, but I became anxious to the point of getting sick because of what everyone thought of me and him and our relationship and what my parents think still, even though I'm, out of the house or whatever. And, I just really, it was like a snowball really, because once I was just worrying myself sick, I would stop eating, and then I, dropped how many pounds and didn't have an appetite. Then I wasn't sleeping and, all these things. And then it was affecting my, I'm supposed to be this good Christian girl, example to my students even. And here I am, how can I be teaching when, my brain can't even function,
Yeah.
So it's just all that compounded, I think. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. So there was a lot of expectations that you felt may or may not have been there. Maybe they were, but but you felt them anyway, and that can be really debilitating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see
yeah,
that.
and I think looking back too, it's like what is our self-worth based on? Is it what other people think, or I think that time of depression really revealed a lot in how weak my own self-worth was, because if it was all stacked up on what people think of me, then that's where I fell really hard, and so I'm so thankful that through that and through counseling and different things have learned to believe who I am in Christ and act on that, and not, have to be a slave, any longer to other people's, expectations, whether perceived or real, So.
Yeah. So how did that affect your view of God? So it obviously affected your view of yourself.
Mhm.
How did it affect the way that you saw and experienced God?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, definitely. I think it influences that a ton, because I think, that basically kind of transferred all onto even, my experience, my relationship with God, in the sense of, like, if I fail at any point, he's so disappointed with me, or, done with me, or going to leave me, or like. And then on the flip side, if I'm doing well in my own standards, right, of, this sort of self-righteousness, well, I can sort of, please God, and kind of earn that salvation, and that, that respect.
All right. Well, take us through this. So then you met your husband,
Hmm.
and did you got married?
We got married in 2008. So
Okay.
let's see, I moved to Nicaragua. He had moved to Nicaragua in 2004, and I moved in 2005. So, I alluded to that sort of dating drama or whatever.
Yeah.
And, praise God, was able to come out of that depression stronger in my faith, and in my understanding of myself, and even, our relationship, Luke and I. And so we got married in 2008. So we're coming up December of this year. It'll be 10 years
Oh,
that
great.
we've been married. Yeah.
It's a good milestone.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get married, and then you guys
Mhm.
served together for a while down there and had some
Yeah.
kids. And
Yeah, we did. It's so interesting, when he first moved there, he went right after college as well. And I don't know if this was true for you, but I feel like right after college, like, all I could think of was maybe a year at a time. It was hard for me to think of more than a few years at a time. And so same for him, they were asking him to make a 2-year commitment, and he was like, I don't know, but he did. And what's cool is that he was there that second year, and then we got to meet. So anyway, then we sort of, yeah, cool. And so what we did was we just kind of kept praying God, just each kind of year, how much longer, and then ended up being, like I said, give or take, because we took a furlough year in there, but almost 12 years. And yeah, so it was just pretty cool to, once we were, married, to work and minister alongside each other. He basically, along with teaching at the Christian school we were at there, he also began a youth program there with the school, and in partnership with the international church there. And so, yeah, lots of years of like excitement and fruit in ministry, and also difficult times too, right? But good to be in it together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And okay, so I want to ask you, because we've kind of already talked about a difficult time, a time when God felt far away, and you had that great quote, "I just need to know God loves me." That was amazing. And it's such an important question.
Yeah.
But I also know that, given all of your experience as a missionary kid and as a missionary yourself, that you really care about missionaries, and
Yeah.
you've written some books to kind of minister to them. I want to start out, at the kind of local church level. Like, what is it that you think churches should know about the experience that missionaries have?
Oh, I love that question, because I think that's the question that we actually need to be asking. And I think it starts with that. And I almost think like that's, that could be one of the root problems that of, the breakdown maybe between local churches and agencies and missionaries that are on the field is sort of that disconnect of like, what is the missionary experience like? And do you care? So, and I think that's, that's where my heart is for missionaries, because I've been in that world and I lived in that world. And, I think there's a great tendency of, our North American culture to sort of, elevate missionaries as these super Christians or people that, are on the front lines of ministry. And, I've heard this often where it's like, oh, I can never do what you do, and well, it's kind of like, I appreciate the sentiment, but at the same time, it kind of like makes you feel like put on a pedestal when really I'm just a normal Christian like you who, has similar struggles, yet I'm in a different part of the world and God called me there for that time, So I think that's a great way to start, is even just asking that question, like how can the local church, even understand or start to care about the sort of what it's like to live overseas. That sounds kind of harsh to say start to care, because there are many people that do.
Right.
But I think, that can kind of be something that I think missionaries struggle with is, having people sort of like know what it's really like and want to enter into that.
Yeah.
And give them the freedom to be honest, like, hey, I'm really struggling. Can I say that I'm, I've struggled with depression? Can I say, I'm feeling really close to burnout here? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Okay. I love that, because one of the, one of the ambitions of what we do here is to say that there are ordinary parts of the journey. And so like something that you went through, that experience of going through depression and just, coming out on the other side more secure in who God believes you to be, right? And who you are in him, is the way we grow, right? We don't grow if we don't have these kinds of experiences. And so why would we expect missionaries or pastors, for that matter, to be, to not go through these things? Because really what we're saying then is that we expect them not to be growing.
Right. Yeah. Or expect them to be perfect, right? People that don't struggle, people that aren't real. Yeah.
Right. Right. And if Paul can say, not that I've already attained it, right?
Yeah.
So are our pastors and missionaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. So that's great. So we definitely, just being aware that it's difficult, and, I think the hard part, and what I heard from you is, you said it at least once, that, hey, I went to a country where I didn't know anybody, right? I was all alone, didn't know a soul. And that, that isolation can even be a factor in, in depression and struggle and loneliness.
Yep. Yeah.
Is it different today because we have more technology that people can connect?
I think so. We're so blessed to be able to do Skype calls and, FaceTime even, or different things. I think that does help, for sure. But I think too, technology still has some shortcomings, but I do believe, like as opposed to years ago where you had to write letters and wait weeks for them to arrive. And I mean, my family, we grew up doing, ham operator, phone patches. Yeah. But yeah, definitely that helps a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because it used to be, I mean, if you go even further back, it was like, hey, I'm going to China or someplace, and
right.
may or not may or may not see you again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, there's tons of ways that now, not only you're talking about technology, but even just transportation. It used to be, boats or like take months to get where you're going, and now you can get across the world in a few hours or handful of hours. And I think too it's helpful, but too just to remember and recognize, like, even though it's quicker and faster, we got internet, we can see faces from across the world, at a touch of a button, still have to recognize like the strain of being in a different culture and the culture shock and all that. Like, you still have to work through that and deal with that. And I think sometimes it can be a little elusive you might trick yourself thinking, oh, it'll be a little easier, but at the same time, those boat rides were good for processing, getting from one country to the next and what's coming ahead, as opposed to like, whoa, you snap your fingers and you're there in a few hours. Like, what just happened? I'm in a different world, all of a sudden. So.
Yeah. Well, there's expense associated with that.
Right.
Both time and money. Okay. So what would you suggest that, like, let's say somebody's on the church missionary board. Mm-hmm. What would you suggest that people do to help care for their missionaries?
Oh, such a great question. Like I said, I think the starting point is to want to do that, to see the need, that there is a need for care. And then I think, the best thing would be like ask another missionary, what would make you feel supported, and then go with those ideas. Some ideas that come to my mind are, regular communication, whether that means like, handwritten like Christmas cards or care packages. Those are huge. Like, don't underestimate the power of like a box of, golden grams being sent,
sure.
across the world. Like, fun things that'll just bring them back to, here's a little piece of, quote unquote home, or, we're thinking about you, but also I think so much we just miss prayer, and dedicated prayer time, maybe setting aside like this, this certain time each week, we're going to pray for this missionary and really pray for them, not just like, oh, help them with that conference they said they were going to run or whatever, but like meet their needs, like physically and spiritually and emotionally, God. And, I mean, there's so many ways, if they're coming back here on furlough, like finding housing for them or helping them get a vehicle or all those practical things that, just might not be on our radar here, that, someone coming back, quote unquote, home, hasn't been here for a few years, just might need help with, and,
Yeah, it's hard to think about all the stuff that, because what people mean when they say something like, I could never do that, is I could never just give up everything, right? And move across the world.
Right.
But then, when they come back, they don't have any of that stuff, right? So you gotta step in that gap and help out. And the other thing I heard you say, so I'll say this to our friends here listening, go out right now. Girl Scout cookies are being sold everywhere. Go buy a box, send it to your favorite missionary. Right? Get some Thin Mints and send it over there.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
it'll just brighten their day, really.
Right. Thin Mints will brighten anybody's day.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So that's a great thing. Well, you have written a couple of books about these topics, which I think is really pretty awesome. It's a great way to take all of your experiences and put them in a really tangible, accessible form for others.
Yeah.
So the first one is Missionaries Are Real People. So I feel like we've talked about that, but what else would you like to share from Missionaries Are Real People that we haven't covered maybe?
I kind of tackle a broad range of topics in that book.
Yeah, you go through everything in there.
Yeah. Some other ones maybe that we haven't talked about is just just kind of the process of transitioning overseas and how we kind of have to unlearn certain things about what we've, been so used to doing, or our thought patterns. And
what are
what else?
so you
Uh-huh.
mentioned there's a number of things that you have to kind of unlearn because you might not be comfortable with a culture. You kind of have to embrace the new culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen so many people that have sort of crashed and burned that aren't able to let go of their home culture and entering a new one. And I think it does. It takes that willingness to just peel away. Okay, this is what I've grown up in or thought, but let me just experience a different way and be
Hmm.
okay with that and let that shake me up, and you know recognize that, yeah, there's certain things that are sin issues, but there's certain things that aren't, and that it's okay to and really our ministry is going to be the most effective if we're willing to be in that spot of, all right, teach me, because I don't want to come in here saying I know everything and I'm going to teach you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And that's got to be an interesting dynamic to try to go in
Mhm.
humbly
Mhm.
and just take in the gospel. You mentioned that
Yeah.
you had to adjust a little bit just going from Bolivia to Nicaragua. That
Yeah.
was a little
Well,
bit
for sure.
even just two Latin American countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and I think
cultures are different.
too, like, yeah, definitely, because I thought, oh, I've got this. I've lived in Latin America all my life, like, but no, there was a lot that was different, and I had to kind of, I really had to humble myself and be like, all right, I need to learn and not, think I've got it, and it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. Your other book is called Ending Well:
Yeah.
Advice for Successful Reentry After Living Abroad. Tell us, like, what are the key aspects of saying goodbye and then coming back and getting settled?
Yeah, well, what we found was actually, in our experience at least, there's so many varying, reasons why missionaries or expats would return to their home culture. But in our experience, to the degree that we left well, on good terms with people, said our goodbyes well, we felt that our entry here
Hmm.
went well. And so that's what I would, I wrote this book, just wanting to help people, with some tools of, like, practical things. How could they leave well and say goodbye to this chapter in their life and these people, these dear people and places, um, with then that being sort of the road to prepare them to enter well, having, done all that, leaving well. I think it really does, at least in our experience, open that way sort of for a smoother, um, entry, in what can be really rocky. Known many people, and even my own times of transition back, to college, or other times where it is really hard, because people don't understand, and it's that reverse culture shock,
Yeah.
and grieving. It really, I think the key thing that happens is that grieving. So I guess what it is if you can sort of grieve well as you're saying goodbye, that helps, because I think that unresolved grief is what really hurts if you've gotten back here and you haven't processed, like, all that goodbye. Then really being present in your new normal is extremely hard, because you're missing what used to be, and maybe even painting sort of, not realistic pictures of what it was like. Um,
Right. We all do
so
that. I'd like to think we all
yeah,
do that because I
yeah,
did. But yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I think just having to grieve when you're leaving and going going elsewhere.
mhm,
You said something that sparked a thought in me that was
uh-huh,
so transitioning back to like even to college, Like, what
Yeah.
did you have any kind of, so whether it's college or now, like, did you ever have an experience where you just went, like, you just didn't get something that was happening
Oh, yeah,
like in our,
totally.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I, would have handled it in two different ways. One way would be ask, what's going on? What did they just say? Or I don't get that. And then, the other response or reaction I would do would just be quiet and silent and just like figure it out by context,
Uh-huh.
which is what I ended up doing a lot more because, it's less embarrassing and
Then
you can
asking.
kind of, you can blend in. You look like everyone else. Usually, I mean, not in my middle school, high school years, I probably looked strange because I wasn't up on the current, trends
Mm-hmm.
of fashion. But yeah, I think it was, uh, the way I coped was just kind of be quiet, figure it out, and go with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's great. Ellen, I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah.
What do you think? I know you guys are here uh going to seminary, which is great.
Hmm.
So what do you think God holds for you guys going forward? I mean, not that any of us know for sure, but like what are you thinking that God's leading you guys to do right now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the million dollar question right now.
Yeah, and otherwise.
Especially, yeah, especially now that Luke's halfway through his program, so he's got a year and a half left. And honestly, um, he and I just started about a week ago, just this 40-day prayer challenge, and just praying about that specifically, and just hands open, God, where do you want us? Is it back overseas? Is it here in Colorado? My heart wants to say, please keep us in Colorado. I love it here.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Just, it's gorgeous. I love the mountains and especially the winters where I can occasionally wear flip flops. It's amazing.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Don't tell anybody. I'm editing that out. We're not telling
oh,
anybody
right.
about the nice
Yeah.
weather in winter.
Stop coming here. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think, I know this is going to sound general, but, it's like, wherever God has us, Luke wants to be in some kind of pastoral ministry. And, I love that he told me recently, when I was kind of talking to like, well, what specifically you want to do? Or, what do you think you want to do after, seminary? And I love that his answer was, you know what? God's will for me is to be a dedicated husband and father. And, wherever that is going to be, that's where I'll be. And I love that that was his priority. So, yeah, but definitely like we want to be in some kind of ministry. Our heart is still in mission. I think it always maybe tied to that. So whether we are on the field or able to, help bridge that connect that bridge between, sending churches and missionaries on the field, or, how to, I'd love to, and that's part of the heartbeat of these books is to, provide resources for missionaries. So whether I'm out there or not, just giving them a way to know that they're heard, they're understood, and, there's practical resources and help for them in their, life. So.
Yeah. Well, Ellen, I think it's really cool that you were able to take your experiences and speak, just some words of encouragement, in both of those books to people who desperately need it. I'm sure that it would have been they're good manuals for anybody who's going through those things, and it comes from somebody who knows. So, also on the topic of your husband being very supportive, I just was impressed by his encouragement of you to write and to continue to do that. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm blessed too. He has been behind me 100%, and that shows even in, he formatted both of my books, to be Kindle versions and then also paperback versions, as well as designed the covers for both of them. So he's pretty awesome, and thankful for his support. I wouldn't have been able to do it without him, because I think too he kind of pushes me to reach those passions of mine and to actually like go for them. So
that's so great. I love that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Ellen, thanks so much for sharing some of your story with us and some of your work. Friends, I will link to Ellen's books, both of them, on the show notes in this page. You can get that at halfwaytherepodcast.com, as well as, she has some Facebook pages for those. I'll get those in there so that you guys can find those as well. If you want to connect with Ellen, you can do it that way. So thanks a lot. Anything else you want to leave us with?
No, I'm just thankful to have been on your show, and I'm grateful to have done it. So thanks.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Friends, keep the faith.